So my name is Michelle Worley. I am the Northeast Outreach Director for Alsana. A little bit about Alsana. We combine data-driven, evidence-based treatment with a fresh, compassionate approach. We do treat all gender adults. We offer RTC, PHP, and IOP, and those locations are in California, St. Louis, and Birmingham. And we have a fun new announcement that we have a new location coming to St. Louis. It's called Juneberry. That will have 12 beds. We are opening July 8th. There will be an open house July 29th, and that'll be from 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time. And also just to touch on our virtual, for PHP and IOP, we are treating in person or virtually as long as we are licensed in that state. So I am going to send it over to Leslie to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Talk Live, special edition. We're very excited to be here today. My name is Leslie Davenport, and I am the Manager of Professional Relations at Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center in New York City. And Balance is an eating disorder program founded by Melainie Rogers here today, a little bit over 12 years ago. And we provide all levels of outpatient care to adolescent and adult clients of all genders. And Balance provides an integrative treatment model and based on a nutritional philosophy of intuitive eating and health at every size. One of the things I wanted to announce today is we're very pleased that Balance has recently been awarded accreditation by the New York State Office of Mental Health as a licensed PHP mental health clinic and telehealth facility. So this really means a lot to us because it means that we're going to be able to provide higher rates of reimbursement to our clients through out-of-network benefits and make care more accessible and affordable to the clients that we've been reaching out to all these years. So I would be happy to share more information about that if anyone wants to get in touch with me. And then Michelle, I think you're going to.
Yeah, Mandy, I'm sorry, I did not introduce Mandy Rector. She is Alsana's Colorado Midwest, I guess, outreach director in that area. So she is one of our wonderful outreach directors as well. But I am going to introduce Tammy Beasley. Tammy is the Vice President of Clinical Nutritional Services at Alsana. She is a certified eating disorder registered dietitian and supervisor. Her experience includes inpatient treatment programs, management of outpatient nutritional programs, and private practice specialization in eating disorders. Tammy was the first dietitian to become certified with IADEP in 1993 and served on the certification committee for 9 years, stepping into the role of director from 2013 to 17. And she joined Alsana in 2015 and with clinical leadership, the team to ensure that the nutrition program blends with both evidence-based science and cutting-edge practices. And one of our guests today, one of our guest panelists, Beth Harrell. Wait, Beth, hi. Beth is a collaborative and weight-inclusive nutrition professional who has worked with eating disorders, disordered eating, and chronic dieting for nearly 30 years. She is a certified eating disorder registered dietitian supervisor, immediate past director of certification services for IADEP, and runs a private practice. Beth is an invited hub expert for the Show Me Eating Disorders ECHO and a member for the Body Balance Coalition in Kansas and an active member of the Missouri Eating Disorders Council and IFED. Her new podcast, The Seasoned RD, is for eating disorder professionals of all disciplines. So welcome, Beth. Thanks for being here.
Thank
And
you.
I'm going to bring it over to Leslie again.
And it's my pleasure to introduce Melainie Rogers. Melainie is a certified eating disorder registered dietitian and is accredited by the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals, IADEP, as a clinical supervisor in the treatment of eating disorders. She is the founder and CEO of Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center and Melainie Rogers Nutrition, located in New York City. Melainie is the founder and past president of the New York City chapter of the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals and has been appointed as a mentor by IADEP's Connection Outreach and Mentoring Committee. She's also been elected co-chair of the Nutrition Special Interest Group by the Academy of Eating Disorders and is an advisory board member at the Center for the Study of Anorexia and Bulimia and a member of a number of other dietetic organizations. Melainie is the author of an online ebook now in print entitled Redefining Wellness, the Ultimate Diet-Free Guide. And she is a professor in the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies at New York University. And I would also like to introduce the wonderful Jessica Setnick to all of you. Jessica Setnick is known to dietitians around the world as an expert in eating disorder nutrition counseling. She is the author of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Pocket Guide to Eating Disorders. In 2019, Jessica shared her decades of public speaking experience in her book entitled A Dietitian's Guide to Professional Speaking, Expert Advice for Pitching, Presenting, and Getting Paid. And she's currently working on a new book, The Counseling Dietitian's Big Book of Answers, Cures for the Questions That Keep You Up at Night. Her signature training workshop for health professionals, Eating Disorders Boot Camp, has been attended by over 2,000 dietitians since 2003. And in 2012, Jessica founded the International Federation of Eating Disorder Dietitians, or we know it as IFED, which has now over 800 members and is growing rapidly worldwide. So through IFED and the Eating Disorder Coalition, Jessica advocates for better access to care for individuals with eating disorders and ending insurance company discrimination and harmful stereotypes. Jessica's passion is helping professionals in all practice areas feel competent, supporting the individuals with dysfunctional eating who are in their care. So with that, we wanted to share a lot about our speakers today because this talk, the focus of the discussion is on professional development for dietitians and healthcare professionals. So we shared a lot about each of our speakers in their bios so that you can really see how they've developed their careers and as role models, I think, to all of us. A few housekeeping issues, just if you have questions or comments, you can enter them in the chat or the Q&A, and periodically our panel will be fielding those questions. We do have some questions that have already been gathered based on some submissions that we received. So we're going to be posing questions, but we also welcome them from you as well. And just so you know, this is being recorded, and we'll be sending everyone the recorded version after this is completed. So let's start by welcoming our panel, Tammy and Mel and Jessica and Beth, to share some opening thoughts with us.
Opening thoughts. Shall I take first go at that, guys? Yeah, opening thoughts are we're thrilled to be here. We're thrilled to be here. And actually, we did some preparation for today's webinar. We had a meeting last week. And just so many great questions, so many great comments, so much great knowledge with my lovely colleagues here. So I'm super excited to be here today and to be able to hopefully glean from, you know, our journeys and our missteps and our trials and tribulations to help those younger RDs who are in the field early in their career path on, you know, how you can get to where you want to go, and also, you know, taking into account some of the challenges that we have and are confronted with, and what do you do and how to not give up, I think. So we're super excited to be here to support younger RDs, because I know that for the four of us, that's something we're very passionate about.
And I'm going to jump in and say that just looking at the screen, I see one of the biggest challenges that we have as a field is that everyone I see on the screen is, you know, appears to be white or white passing. And I think that that's a huge challenge in our field. How can we relate to the community, all communities, when people look at us and see a stereotype? And each of us knows that we aren't a stereotype, but it's an image that we have, and the field has, really been seen as exclusive and elitist and excluding people. The research has excluded many, many, many different types of people. And I think that that's been a detriment to everyone with eating disorders. And so what Leslie said about me working to combat harmful stereotypes, I think one of the harmful stereotypes is that, there's a look to eating disorders. And I know there's a lot of people working to combat that. And I hope that eventually we also change the face of dietitians. So we look at a screen like this and see a lot more diversity.
And if I can add to that, I know Leslie said that this panel is role models to all of us. However, I'm looking around and you all are role models to me. And like Jessica said, we can look at someone and we can think they're white or white passing or straight sized or whatever our identities are, but we really don't know until we open up and learn from each other. So thank you for those pieces. And I just am so excited to see names that I recognize and people who are newer. And I can't wait to have this panel with you all.
I have very little to add to all of that other than this coffee talk experience has been such an enriching time for me personally. And I am always grateful for anyone who will take time out of their day to chat. And we need each other. As Beth said, very grateful to each of you here. You're changing lives out there. And I love that you are on the path of continually changing your own and seeking ways to grow and get better. And I am seeing some diversity in age. So here's to the decade practicers. And I love that. I love that too, because we never stop learning. And I feel like the more I know, the less I know, and the more I want to know. And that's a good place to be. So lots of challenges ahead. Last thing I want to say is I am as excited, challenged, frustrated in a positive way, and energized by this field as I was 35 years ago. And that's a real gift. So I'm very appreciative of that. And it's not been easy. And there's even more challenges today, but I love that we can love what we do and remain challenged by it no matter how long we've been in the field. So
thanks, Tammy. I know we keep on thanking the attendees for being here, but I also just want to take a moment to thank Melainie, Beth, Jessica, and Tammy for taking the time out of your day and just sharing your experience and wisdom. So thanks a lot. So I am going to kick it off with the first question. So here goes. For dietitians and practitioners interested in specializing in eating disorders, what's your best advice about what training and certification they should receive? Beth, do you mind taking the lead on this?
I'll take the lead, and I know there'll be conversation about this. So number one, if you haven't had this in your undergrad or internship, is nutrition counseling, is understanding the difference between handing someone a meal plan and listening to what is happening in their world. So that would be number one. Number two, really infusing yourself into the psychology. We learn a lot about formulas and we learn a lot about calculations, and that can be, and I don't want to stereotype dietitians, but we're told that we're pretty precise, and not all of us are like that. But the psychology is super important. And fortunately, from the academy, we get our CEs. We're allowed to get CEs from therapy sessions. So as anything that interests you, jump in. And there's so much available right now. I have a whole file as emails come in just on CE opportunities. And sometimes I sign up for 2 or 3 at a time. I obviously can't be there. And I think, oh, I'm going to get back to this recording and do another one. And I had another professional share with me yesterday, well, we do have to work. We can't just webinar all the time. And I'm like, oh yeah, dang it. So psychology is an important piece. And last, but certainly not least, anyone interested in the field of eating disorders and disordered eating who is hanging their hat saying that they do treat this, consultation and supervision. Okay, whether you are going towards a certification or not, and I know that I know at least Jessica and I had been in consultation with psychologists, some psychiatrists, and other dietitians for years before we even knew about certification. And it's common in the world of therapy, but not so common for dietitians. And so it's not my co-host for my podcast, the CEDRD, and the ED and seasoned is capitalized, so EDRD. She said, Beth, supervision is a beast. And it feels that way. Someone new coming into the field, like, what does this mean? If I'm going for certification, that means I have to have 24 hours with my supervisor. I have to have 2,500 practice hours. Like, that's more than your internship, you guys. So it feels like a beast. And every single one of my guests will tell you on the podcast, will tell you that supervision was the best. It truly, like, as hard as it is to become vulnerable and open up and to get into the groove, that's the best way to learn. We can watch webinars all day long. It's when we're practicing with our client. So consultation, supervision. If anyone has questions about certification, of course, that is another layer that when you get it, it is something to be proud of. It is intense. And there's a lot of concern about how long it takes. And therefore, that means you can be extra proud when you get it. So the CEDRD, Certified Eating Disorder Registered Dietitian, the CEDS, Certified Eating Disorder Specialist, any of those have the same requirements. You attend 4 core courses on the diagnostics and the therapeutics and the nutrition and the medical. And then now there's all kinds of modules on neurobiology and nursing and physical therapy and all the things that are so important.
Suicidality, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, and suicidality has been part of that for a long time. Yeah, very important.
I just want to add to what Beth said that I hope you hear the underlying message is supervision.
Yeah.
And you have choices whether you choose to do the certification track or not. That is not the only reason for supervision by any means. And agree, Beth, my early years, 90s, 1990, moved to Miami, and there was not another dietitian doing eating disorder counseling, which is kind of shocking when you think of Miami, Florida, which has 200 plus nationalities, and people go to college football games in their string bikinis. No kidding. All body sizes, the tension, they're filming models everywhere you turn around. It's an intense place to live. So my supervision was only through therapist, and I'm so grateful. I mean, and so just that cross discipline is so important. And doing our own work also, we learn by what was powerful in our own lives through doing our own work, that we then can share with others and pass on. So supervision, 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 however you choose to define that, is so, so important. Yeah.
And not just for certification. I still go through consultation. I would say at least once a month, I'm reaching out to someone with a different lived experience.
Absolutely. And, and I think, Jess, you want to say something there?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, sweetie. Do you want me to unmute you? Just a second.
Oh, I got it.
There you go.
Sorry.
Yep.
Classic Zoom fail. I was just going to say, me too. I don't even see clients anymore, and I still do supervision because I need guidance on working toward diversity, equity, and inclusion in our field.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And where I started as well, because none of us get ED training right back in school. That's still hit or miss and optional. And there were very few opportunities to even intern in an ED facility to get that internship training. So most of us step into the field with none of that. So where else do you get the knowledge? And where I got the knowledge is actually from you, Jess. And I went to one of your initial boot camps with you and Molly Kellogg, and you blew my mind. And in that, you said you need supervision, you need supervision. And to your point, Tammy, there weren't any RDs who were supervising in ED because not many of us had training. So we set up a group of us from that training, actually, Jess, got together I think there were 4 of us as RDs, and we found a wonderful therapist who did have ED experience. And the 4 of us would meet with her and do our case consultation there. And that was before we even knew about the CEDRD. So it was really about, I don't want to hurt my clients because I don't know what I'm doing, because we don't have counseling and we don't have, much psych behind us. And I was terrified of doing something wrong and hurting our clients inadvertently. So it was really from that perspective that I sought out that counseling, that supervision. And, I know there's been a lot of talk about how expensive all of this is that we're, talking about today. And there is expense involved, yes. But one way that we made it less expensive as brand new RDs was we got together and had a group of us. And so we shared the cost of the therapist supervision. And the other thing I would say is back then, I know I'm aging myself here, but, we didn't have all these webinars and we didn't have all this online training that's available. And so we had to wait, Jess, for you to say, hey, I'm coming to New York. And then the next year or 2 years later, when you came back, I had a couple of RDs working with me by that stage. And so I took them. And so Jess was able to, train them as well. So, but now there's so much more available, which I think is just wonderful. And low cost, if not free. We've done so many webinars this last year. That any new RDs can access on our YouTube channel, and they're all free. So there's a lot of really inexpensive opportunities to increase your knowledge. And you know what? Some really good books don't cost much at all. And the one that we're using right now, the reason I'm going over here is, Christy Harrison's, not to kind of pump these, but also an essential read that we're using in my course at NYU. Everyone should pick this up and read this, Jen Guardiani's book, right? And of course, Marsha Heron's book, this one that we should all be reading. So again, that's 3 books and maybe they're $30 each, but there's a lot of opportunities to educate ourselves at not a great expense as well. All right.
I agree.
All right.
Those are great resources.
We can share those resources.
Yep, great. Yes, I'll post the books, Bonnie, no worries.
I'm going to move to another question, and we can always touch back on anything that's come up before, of course. This one is, what advice can you share about work experience and finding employment in the eating disorder field? What sort of employment options are available? Are there good resources for this? And I'm going to ask Jessica to kick this one off.
Sure. So I think that, Melainie, you took me back when you were talking about eating disorders boot camp, because the original reason I started eating disorders boot camp was to help students who would say, I don't have any experience, so how can I get a job? And I don't have a job, so how can I get experience? And so boot camp was supposed to be a way, we were going to have a certification at the end of boot camp, and so that people could be certified, and that would be something they could put on their resume. to show that they had taken an interest in eating disorders and that they had this certification. And no one signed up for the certification back then, because I guess I'm not Tammy Beasley and I can't convince people to get the certification. So I just took that part out of Eating Disorders Bootcamp. It was only offered at the first one, and then I never did it, never offered it again. But that, I totally get that. And I did a study with Paula Quattromoni, and one of the things that we found was that, you know, unfortunately, our most inexperienced dietitians are treating our most acute patients, because a lot of treatment facilities hire brand new dietitians because, you know, rightly so, I guess they want to mold the dietitians in their own model. And so it turns out there are a lot of opportunities for dietitians who want to specialize in eating disorders. And hopefully through that first job, you get a lot of training, appropriate training, and maybe an education budget to go to a conference, and maybe you get your supervision paid for, or maybe there's a dietitian that works there. My one guideline for dietitians working in any field, but especially in eating disorders, is do not take a first job where you are the only dietitian. I mean, I know sometimes you just have to take a job, but if you have a choice, don't take a job where you're the only dietitian, because then you're the smartest dietitian in the room. And that's not that good if you've just finished school. So it's always good to be able to learn from other dietitians. Now, if you have to, you know, take a job where you're the only dietitian, then make it a point to learn from the other people there, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the nurses, etc., you know, however best you can. And again, get that facility to pay for supervision. I have lots of supervisees whose facilities pay for supervision because, let's say, they're the only dietitian in MHMR and they see lots of people with eating disorders and it's not what they're trained to do. And so their facility will pay for that, and they can get CEUs so they can pay for it in their educational budget. So I feel like taking a job, you know, of any kind is really appropriate, you know, even if it's not in the eating disorder field, because there's two things I've noticed that my colleagues who never worked in a hospital do differently, and I think it's a barrier. And this is even if they've worked in a general hospital, not necessarily an eating disorder facility. And those two things are, one, they tend to be less comfortable with setting boundaries around the scope of practice, because when you work in a hospital, and I know a lot of people here have done so, you know, it's very clear, like if a patient says, I don't think I've had my medication today, you go get a nurse, right? It's like you learn sort of the roles very easily of what the doctor role, the dietitian role, the therapist role, the nurse role. I'm thinking of one time when I was in a session, a treatment team meeting with a patient, and they said they had sores in their mouth. And I told them about this over-the-counter medicine that I use when I have a sore in my mouth. And the nurse pulled me aside later and said that the attending wanted me to let me know through the nurse, my worst favorite kind of communication, triangulated communication. But the nurse let me know that the psychiatrist wanted me to know that, you know, when you're talking to a patient with an eating disorder, you cannot just recommend some over-the-counter thing that you use, because if they have a sore in their mouth, it really needs to be assessed by their medical doctor first before deciding on the treatment. And so that's the kind of thing that you learn in that kind of setting. And my colleagues who have not been in a hospital setting, let's say their first job was in a college student health or something like that, they end up sometimes overstepping or not being able to hold boundaries about what is the dietitian's role. The other thing is the levels of care. And when you've worked in a hospital, especially an eating disorder facility, you get really comfortable with the fact that just because someone's ambulatory does not mean that they're an outpatient level of care appropriate. And so I think that that's something I've observed also, is that my colleagues who work with individuals with eating disorders in private practice who haven't ever worked in a higher level of care are seeing some really, unfortunately, severely ill individuals. And sometimes that's appropriate in outpatient, but I feel like there's less of a sort of that conviction of helping motivate or move someone toward a higher level of care when necessary. So I think even taking a job that's not eating disorder specific at the beginning in a higher level of care can be really helpful. So that's my sort of guidelines for, you know, for working in the field. But I also would say, as far as looking for a job, there's a couple of things that are really important. One is, and of course, all your normal locations that a dietitian would look for a job, you know, Indeed and dietitian jobs and nutrition jobs, but there's also eating disorder jobs, and eatingdisorderdjobs.com is a site that I started as I mean, my goal was to make money. It doesn't make a dime. So it's turned into an aspirational site where we just give advice, basically, because no one was hiring during COVID. Maybe that will change, but we do have a lot of job listings there, but we also have a lot of inspiration from people in the field. And it's not just dietitians, there's also therapists and doctors and marketing staff. And so there's lots of ways to get involved in the eating disorder field, not just as a clinician. So I'd really encourage you, if you're, in that sort of needing inspiration phase, to check out eatingdisorderdjobs.com. And there are job postings also. And then IFED, if you're a part of, if you are a dietitian, even if you don't work full-time in eating disorders, if you just have an interest in eating disorders, IFED is the International Federation of Eating Disorder Dietitians. And a lot of people who are members of IFED will post when they are looking to hire someone. And I can't think of a better opportunity to learn than from an eating disorder dietitian who hires you for their practice and then supervises you on the job in real time. I mean, that would be an amazing way to really learn. And so people just post jobs on IFED when they're looking. I just saw one the other day. So I think for the $25 investment to join IFED, it's well worth it. And also we waive the fee for anyone if that is a barrier. I'm sure there are other things that I haven't thought of. I will also just add that if you happen to be in a historically underrepresented group in eating disorders, and basically that would be anyone besides, a white female, then we're starting a support group for anyone that fits in that category, and it's called Hugs ED. And we also are coming out with an ebook to inspire people. So I just feel like our field needs more people. We are never going to not need more people working in this field. Unfortunately, it would be nice if someone found a cure for eating disorders and then we all just retired and talked about the bad old days. But until that happens, I just want to do anything I can to inspire anyone on this call that isn't already working in eating disorders to consider it.
That's wonderful, Jess.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tam. I just wanted to clarify the name of the group that you're starting. You said it's called Hugs.
Historically underrepresented groups specializing in eating disorders. So
okay.
CSSD.
Okay, so great. Oh, I love
Love that.
So you're so good.
know.
You're so good
I
with that
know.
acronyms.
She
Yeah.
is so good.
Actually, I won't be running it. It will be Mia Harris, since I am not a member of a historically underrepresented group. I am a member of the majority represented group. So it will not be run by me. It's going to be run
So
by
Mia Harris, awesome. Yeah, I love Mia. Mia's one of the outreach directors. So Alsana, I got a tag on to Jessica, and I saw the Annika, I believe I saw the question around, have any of you guys experienced burnout? So I want to put the two together. I used to say, and still say probably, is that I know it sounds painful, but I actually recommend a couple of years in a hospital setting, a clinical setting. I don't discourage that. I will say that for sure. And again, it teaches you so much about being part of a team, learning your voice, holding your boundaries, and holding strong too with the role of the dietitian and the physicians. You get the good, bad, and the ugly. Some respect, some not respectful, all of those things. But again, I would not discourage that. The reason treatment centers get and yes, it's a painful problem that I lose sleep over, is that our most highest acuity clients overall will have the greenest staff in a treatment center. And I've come to see that as reality, but constantly pushing for a higher salary for sure. But I, the reality is, when you're in the treatment center field, is private practice is glamorous. So it seems. There's a lot about it not glamorous, and there's a lot about it really crazy great. And we've come to where you can have your cake and eat it too. It's kind of a new thought process for Alsana, that we know we're going to train wonderful clinicians, therapists, and dietitians, and they're going to leave to go to private practice. And, you know, we're trying to see that as, you know, oh gosh, don't leave us, but like, you know, you're welcome, and how can we help you with the rest of your career? Because we want to be able to invest in our future clinicians. So it's discouraging. My personal goal would be that a treatment center would become actually attractive to someone, so attractive to someone, they would come out of private practice back to it. That's an uphill battle. I'm not giving up. Again, pay is a big deal, but I would definitely, if you are going to join a treatment center, if you're a student, look for some, you know, I have hired every intern I've had outside of maybe one or two. And I know therapists the same way, that we hire those we get to know. So if you're willing to do a rotation, a shadow, like even show that kind of, even if you're in private practice, just say, hey, I'd love to shadow what it's like in you know, a treatment center, whatever. We're very open to that. But also, lost my train of thought. It was really important. Phooey, I hate when that happens. Look for a treatment center that will invest in you, because you're not going to make per hour what you can make outpatient practice. But it's the intangibles. It's that constant, like, treatment team meetings, weekly, daily meetings with the therapist, fellow colleagues, fellow dietitians, senior dietitians. Look for a treatment center that will financially support your education. You know, we try to make up for whatever the salary differential would be between outpatient and, you know, inpatient, whatever, with 1,000 to 1,500 support for CEUs, which would include, if you want to be certified, yeah, that's it. And then look for a treatment center that has certified approved supervisors if you're interested in certification, because you're getting it naturally as a part of your everyday work. And
it's worth a lot.
It's worth a lot. And you get the cross-reference too. So just kind of throwing a bunch of things out there. So back to burnout. Burnout is the biggest problem we have in higher levels of care, because we also have our youngest, newest clinicians. It is a major priority to protect the culture, protect the self-care, look out for burnout. It's huge. Have I experienced it 3 to 4 times for sure, intensely? Serious burnout. Yeah. And I've learned some hard lessons that way too. So anyway, but burnout's a real thing. We all, and we have to be very aware of it, and do try to work, if you work with a company, try to work with a company who is very intentional about trying to protect burnout, because it's super real.
So true. And I think you wanted to say something there, Beth.
I want to pull in Jessica, Tammy, Annika, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, all of this together. Because and I'm going to start with the simplest, where Jessica, you said IFED. Like, I tell people who are brand new to the field, that's the first thing I tell them to get into. And I'm shocked when, like, 2 years later, they say, oh yeah, I haven't joined IFED yet. It's like, that's first stop. Okay. So then moving on to the different levels of treatment, getting the training there. Well, and moving people from outpatient to inpatient, if you're an outpatient RD, is kind of like getting people to do IFED on a much smaller scale. But you do, and I started as an inpatient RD in a hospital setting. And this is what I want to say. It's a great place to get experience for that level of care. When I switched to outpatient, it's a fish out of water. You really think that you may know. I felt like I knew because I had 24/7, you know, with eating and doing groups and having the nurse with me and the other team members. And then you are out there and you see your client for a short time, once a week or twice a week or once every other week. And you don't have to do this alone. Okay, so that's part of where that supervision and consultation goes. Yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to say is that level of care. Those are all great experiences, and there's learning that happens in each of them.
Absolutely. Thanks, Beth. And I was talking to a couple of my students around this idea of, you know, when we graduate and we get our RD, like it's so cool, right, to have those letters after our name. But, you know, going by the standards of care, I think what we have to remember is even though we feel like we know a lot, and we do, we're still very much a novice at that point. And I think the difference is that when you step into treating eating disorders, it's important that we remember eating disorders have the second highest mortality of any of the mental illnesses. And it used to be first, except for because of the opioid crisis. Opioid abuse is now number one. So we're talking about something that's pretty scary, guys. And I know that after working in a hospital setting for a while and working for another nutritionist for a couple of years to learn from her, when I stepped into private practice, I remember the very first client that I had to call 911 for because I thought she was going to have a heart attack on my sofa. And it scared the, excuse the expression, bejesus out of me. And I ended up taking her to, you know, a psych ward and going to visit her. And thank goodness I had done the boot camp with Jess and I had supervision. So I actually had some support around me, and it was still terrifying because when you're in a hospital setting, as an example, you get up to the date lab work all the time, right? It's absolutely available to you. When you step into private practice, you're in a black hole. It's just you. You don't have access to the latest lab work. Is this client going through refeeding? What's their heart condition? It's, to be honest with you, it's pretty terrifying if you're dealing with high acuity. So I just say to be very, very careful if you are, because now with social media and coaching and all of that taking off, a lot of RD, new RDs, understandably, you want to go into private practice. I know I did. But just do yourself a favor and do your clients a favor and really think about the training. And if you want to step straight into private practice, my goodness, do not treat clients who have high acuity, screen them out, send them over to someone who actually knows what they're doing. You owe that to the client and you owe it to yourself, because if you have a client die on your watch, I know I'm being rather morbid right now, but I think it's important to say that this is not a game. And these clients are really, really scary.
And if you're in it long enough, you will lose someone that you care about. Yeah.
We've all lost clients. Yes. So again, I don't want to, you know, because I'm all about promoting our students and career paths. But I think what we're saying is that there are stages, and a novice stepping into private practice and charging whatever our private practices prices are is saying I'm an expert, but you're not. So, you know, just to be mindful around that. Jess, I'm wondering what you might have to say about that.
Well, I wanted to go back and just address burnout and say that I think one of the biggest causes of burnout is that is the fact that we're so misunderstood. And I bet that Annika can relate to this. I don't know if this is the reason you asked the question, but I feel like so often we are like starting from scratch. We are explaining, we are seeing something that no one else is seeing. We are the one that is saying, no, I understand. The doctor said that you're cleared for softball, but you should not be doing a sport where you jump up from the bench when your heart rate and your blood pressure drop every time you stand up. You know, is that kind of stuff. And I feel like sometimes that's the wear and tear that I experienced. And I saw that you unmuted yourself, so I'd like to hear what you were asking or what you wanted to know about burnout or say.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm running the Calm Clinic, and I have about 4 sites with 7 nutritionists, and one of them out in Arizona, we have with COVID so many bad cases.
Yes.
And one of the nutritionists there, I mean, it's a matter of, yes, we refer to higher level of care. We have Rosewood, we have lots of places to go to, but, you know, they don't want to go, or the parents aren't on board. We see how sick they are. The nutritionists feel very responsible for them. And it's just like Melainie said, you know, it's a matter of how do we get everybody on board and get the best treatment? And one of my nutritionists out there, she basically said, you know, and it's not that the Calm Clinic, she loves working with us. I supervise them weekly for free. We have monthly staff meetings. We have supervision by CEDRD, so they get the certifications. So it's not us as a clinic. They belong to IDAP and other resources. It's just too much with treating these patients where, you know, she just felt, I can't take it anymore. You know, a 14-year-old not eating, the parents aren't on board, don't go to higher level of care, etc. And she said, I have to take a break. I have to
That's
go
what I'm
there. And
talking
I'm
about.
thinking about getting a therapist on board the team just for supervision and not
Yes.
just being from me, but and hopefully if we open an IOP, we will have a therapist on board and we'll offer that too. But I mean, this is tough.
A lot of us get into the field because we want to be helpful, and then we're in a field where we don't know what causes eating disorders, we don't know what cures them, so we feel like we're not doing the thing that we wanted to do. And yeah, it can get very frustrating and isolating. And I think when you're an empath and you take it home with you, or a high sensitivity person, and you know, I'm very encouraging of my supervisees to come up with a ritual at the end of the day where they write down everything that's stressing them out and put it in a drawer, and then say a prayer or an affirmation or whatever it is that they do, 10 jumping jacks, whatever it is that they can do, so that they leave the office, shut the door, even if your office is your home office, and you're going to go back in there in 5 minutes and get on your computer, just shut sort of the work day part of your day down. And so that every time you think about things in the evening, you can say, oh no, that's in the drawer and I'll go handle that tomorrow. But I can tell you, I have a guideline, which is if you're worrying about a patient and you can't sleep at night, that's why in my new book, I changed the name from what you said, Leslie, to the Sleepless Dietitian's Big Book of Answers. But I feel like if you can't sleep at night, then it's probably because your patient's in the wrong level of care. But a lot of times we have no control over that. And I personally think everyone in this country is in the wrong level of care. Probably everyone would benefit from outpatient visits with a dietitian, and everyone who's outpatient would benefit from IOP, and everyone who's an IOP would benefit from day treatment, and everyone in day treatment would benefit from partial, and everyone in partial would benefit from res, and everyone in residential would benefit from inpatient. But because of the situation, you know, of our insurance situation and the misunderstandings about eating disorders, I feel like it puts us in a really challenging situation. And that's why we have to stick together and really affirm that for each other, that it's not you, it's not that you're inadequate, it's that we're all inadequate in the face of an eating disorder. And I'll add one more thing so that I don't get that feeling that I'm talking too much, that I talked about in your podcast, Beth. But my one more thing is just simply that we don't necessarily feel like pioneers. We are pioneers. We feel like eating disorders is this established field, and there are guidelines and we can follow them and everything turns out okay. And it's not correct, right? So in school, you know, if you wrote on a test question, like the answer, you wrote, I don't know, I'm going to consult with 2 of my classmates and I'll get back to you on Tuesday, you would not get any credit and you might get accused of cheating. But in the real world, that's what we have to do. We have to say, I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to consult with some colleagues and get back to you on Tuesday. And so we are not used to not having the answers because of the way we're trained. And so it's sort of like the same skills that get you to being a dietitian are not the same skills that make you not burnt out as a dietitian. And so it's almost like you're learning this whole new skill set from scratch, right? And so it's just, we have to remember that this field is so new, we don't have all the answers, and it's really hard for us because we were all straight A students, and this is, you know, we're facing up against a mental illness, even though we don't see it. And that's where, I guess I said that was going to be the last thing, but this is really the last thing, is that,
We'll
you know,
see.
if our patients, we'll see, if our patients were walking down the street, pushing a grocery cart, talking to pigeons, we might more obviously identify the mental illness. But as someone who's had an eating disorder, I can tell you, I believe it is an intermittent mental illness. It only flares up at certain times around certain foods or certain situations. And so, you know, we might be seeing someone and the doctor says, oh, they're sleeping so much better. And the therapist says, oh, their stress level is so much better. And we say, well, when I ask them to try to eat a bagel, they jump 3 feet in the air and cry, you know? And so it's like, we are the only people sometimes that see the true severity, because what doctor is saying, what happens when you think about eating a bagel? You know, the doctor's not going to see that mental illness because it's only an intermittent mental illness. They're going to see a well-dressed, well-groomed person who's number one on the track team. And so it's really, really hard to be the nutrition professional on the team, because we do see things that not everyone else is seeing. And so I think those are all the things that contribute to burnout. And it's so important to recognize those are all external things that we have no control over. And so I think it's wise that your dietitian said she needed a break, but at the same time, I feel like I'm shocked when everyone doesn't need a break, because it's really tough work.
And you had mentioned, Annika, about the parents, and I worked at a children's eating disorders outpatient and medical stabilization program for 8 years. And when I'm in my private practice, I schedule twice as much time if it is an adolescent or a teen, so that I can spend time with the parents. Oh my gosh, you're treating, it's like we're family therapists almost. It is exhausting. So let's just hold space for that in and of itself for your RD. I mean, and the parents are subject to diet culture.
That's right.
Like the child. And we know where we would want their mind frame to be, and it feels like molasses on a winter day. It's nothing that's moving at all.
And I just want to add to the younger group here, which I'm so proud of that you're all here, that when she asked, Annika, how do you do it? I said, number one, I have a passion for it because I had an eating disorder that I overcame. And there's nothing more important for me than to help somebody else. Number two, I raised 2 kids and have 4 grandchildren. I know what teenagers are like. I don't worry about it. It will pass. And number 3, I have 35 years of experience. It takes sort of a hardcore to go through and have faith and put the faith into the patient. But, you know, if you don't have the experience, it's really tough. Yeah. It's really tough. So, but thank you for addressing the issue.
So true, Annika. And what I think you're speaking to there so eloquently is that when it is all new, every client, you know, your anxiety as the clinician goes to 100, because like, oh my God, is this refeeding? Oh my goodness, is this underfeeding? Oh my goodness. Whereas once you're a little bit more seasoned, you can step back a little bit and pick what's important and then be like, no, it's this and this. Not in a planful way, but that's also what comes with the gift of experience, I think, is you can cut through a lot of the, is it this or this or this? So that helps as well. But burnout is really huge. No one tells us what to do around it, or that it is a factor, because we're dealing, as you all have said, with the emotional piece as well as the medical piece. You know, if you were just giving someone a diet plan, and you're working 40 hours, you know, that's tiring, but not as depleting as being emotionally engaged with someone and holding that space and holding those emotions with them. And then you're having all of your own anxieties around, you know, am I doing this well? Is this client safe, etc. So a very real thing. The way I know I'm burnt out, lovely ladies, is I get escape fantasies. It's like, I need to find an island and I've got to get on a plane and I've got to get the hell out of here for a week, you know? And so I realize now that if you're a bit more planful in your vacations, that can offset, you know, that kind of escape fantasy of black and white thinking. But just to kind of share, it's very real, and we're just human, you know? Anyway, back, right? Go ahead.
I would like to comment on Taylor's response, because it is Pride Month, and I want to acknowledge Pride Month. And if we think it's rough for us and for parents and for other, the oppression that is felt by, like Jessica said, historically underserved groups, being a trans EDRD, can you imagine fighting that uphill battle against so many people and their ideas.
Exhausting.
So thank you for putting that out there, Taylor. And
yeah, absolutely, Taylor. Absolutely. Okay, back to Leslie and Michelle.
Yeah, I am going to read off the next question. This is a great question, one of my favorites. Do you think our current academic institutions provide adequate education to nutrition students in terms including eating disorders, intuitive eating, and health at every size in their curriculums? If not, what can we do in the eating disorder community to affect change? Melainie, I'm going to bring that one.
Yeah, it's a big one. We were talking about this. So the short answer is no, they do not. I think I'm not sharing any secrets when I say that the academy is a little bit behind in the curriculum that they require us as RDs to go through. I went through my RD training 20 years ago, and food service was a part of the clinical training. I still remember on the exam to be an RD, I had to know the can gauge size, 12, I think it was. I'm sure they've changed the question. Oh, did I get it wrong, Jess? 10, was it? I must have got it wrong. And the aisle size, the width of the aisle in the kitchen, all very well and good. I'm sure for people who think they might go into that field, I thought it was a complete and utter waste of my time. But, you know, just sharing my opinion. And the reality is, thank goodness we've now finally getting a little bit more, highlighting around the research that diets don't work. 95% of diets fail. Our training is put people on a diet to help them become healthier. We know that actually it's the reverse and the opposite. So we're way behind the times. I don't know if, you know, Tammy, I'll ask you in a sec, or Beth, if, you know, with your involvement with the academy, why that might be the case, and Jess as well. But long story short, what I've started to do, I took on teaching an ED class at the only ED class at New York University here for the graduate level nutrition students after the previous professor stepped down. I felt very honored because that's where I did my training. And this is what I know. This is my 4th year. The students very quickly get very angry with what they're learning from the content that I'm sharing with them, because they've never heard it before. They've never heard, you know, that diets don't fail, and they've never heard, or they have through social media, but they haven't learned it through their curriculum about health at every size, weight stigma, weight inclusivity, intuitive eating. And they're asking why not? And so what my hope is, and now I have the ear of the new RD internship director. We have a new person now, and she's very, very focused on diversity and giving our RDs to be what they actually need to go out there and be an RD present day. So we used to be trained, I think, because I think our career path was a hospital setting, and that was about it. 20 years ago, when I went through my training, I wasn't interested in that. I wanted to go into private practice. And more RDs want to do that or do other things. And the health and wellness field is at least a $64 billion a year annual in the US alone. And we're not really a big part of that equation. So I think that we have to get on board, because especially with social media and influencers, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, we need to be the voice. We need to be the voice, the experts out there in the health and wellness field, out there in private practice, and not people who've taken one class for 40 hours and can call themselves a nutritionist. So there's a huge knowledge gap there that I really hope the Academy will help us to step into. In the meantime, we have to seek out extra training after we graduate. But coming back to the anger that I'm tapping into among our students, like, they're furious, and they're saying, I've spent tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the knowledge that I have been given is out of date and antiquated, and this is not okay. I think that's awesome. And I think use that voice to then go back to the academy, to go back to the schools and say, this is not okay. You guys need to do better and get more up to date. So I'm encouraging our students to have a voice and to do that. And also I'm so proud of my students. They got together and they developed an association just a couple of months ago called the Anti-Diet Dietetic Students Org. Balance has sponsored them to get them started with their website and such. We had a panel where we discussed the anti-diet, where we had Christy Harrison and a few people. We had over 1,000 students register for that panel, which we only advertised for what, 6 weeks, Leslie?
Right.
We had over 500 actually live join us. That, thanks so much for putting that in, Leslie. That tells you the magnitude. This is like a powder keg, you know, and with social media, our students out there, they've heard of intuitive eating. They've heard of all these different things, and they're eager to learn, which is awesome. So Jess, I wish I could convince you to come back with your boot camp and all these other you know, things that we need to do. But anyway, so that's my, thank you for allowing me to kind of voice my very strong opinion and rant a little bit, because I am frustrated, because as I said, 20 years ago I was frustrated with what I was learning. But nonetheless, you know, you do what you need to do, because don't get me wrong, getting your RD is still incredibly valuable. It's still incredibly valuable. And so I suggest caution against throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you know what I mean, but rather working with our institutions and our educational facilities to bring about improvement. And the way to do that is through clear communication and meetings and effort. But it can change, you know. So I wonder what the rest of my panel thinks. Tammy, did you want to say something to that?
I wanted, but you can go ahead, Jessica, because I want to give a true story of recent academy interaction, but go ahead, Jess.
I was just gonna say that when I stopped doing boot camp the first time in 2007, I think, I just it never occurred to me I would go back to doing it, because I just assumed that eating disorders would be incorporated into the dietetics curriculum. So when I started doing it again, the Eating Disorders Boot Camp Next Generation in 2017, I thought that was absurd. 10 years had elapsed and there was still nothing. So it just, that's all I wanted to say. It's just, it never occurred to me that we'd still be talking about this however many years later and it would still not be in the curriculum.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so shocking. And if I may say one point, then I'd love to ask Tammy about what you're seeing at Fancy or within the A&D now. But what I want to remind everyone is that we used to hear that eating disorders were less than 1% of the population. So if you think about prioritization, and they're regarded as a mental illness, so not medical, which is our training. But if you look now, when we look at prevalent studies, 10% of the population at some point in their lifetime will develop an eating disorder. 10%, that's over 30 million Americans. And guess what? The key piece of an eating disorder is relationship with food. Who's the food specialist? It's the RD. So and disordered eating, good Lord above, is so much more than that. It's the other 90% of the population, it feels like. But Tam, go back to you. So what I'm saying is that you're going to see it whether you like it or not, or whether you plan for it or not, and we need to be trained accordingly. So over to you, Tam.
Two thoughts real quick. I know all of us, I know the panel, we all speak anytime we can to students, and I highly recommend offering your services free to a nearby dietetic internship program. And we shouldn't do it free, but it's an educational institute, and I will come free to get the message to the students. And I do that all the time. Same with Melainie. I mean, because they really are hungry and they haven't heard it before. But I wanted to give you just an insight into thoughts and musings around the academy. And if you have been to Fancy over the last 5 years, I would say, it's noticeable that there is a stronger, little by little, but there's a stronger presence of behavioral health, mental health. We have had some pretty dramatic panels there. Christy Harrison was one, and she did a beautiful job, kind of point counterpoint, with a very strong, opinionated, well-published obesity researcher. So I love seeing that. But what I wanted to give you insight into is the year plus process of working as one of those involved with the writing of the standards of practice for eating disorder dietitians. I do think that here's what happened at FNC, intuitive eating, Elise Resch, Evelyn, I'm like, what's about time they're here? How long has that been out? 95, all that. I remember where I was, what I was wearing when I first read it, all of that. So it's like 1995. So here we are. They're the first time they've invited to FNC. It's packed house, 10,000 plus in the keynote speaker room. And the two Academy wonderful women who we had been living with, writing these standards, one of them came up to me, and she's about my age, and she was so excited about the message she had just heard. And she said, have you heard this before? I've never heard this. You have to add this into the standards of practice. My first reaction was I wanted to laugh, but my second was like, she's really sincere, and it really has rocked her world. And we found that they don't know what they don't know. And it makes sense if your world is the research constantly, and the JCO standards, the accreditation standards, that's all they know. And I haven't found the resistance that and this is in the managing governing of the Academy. I don't think they know. The standards we brought in, relationship, we brought in weight stigma, we brought in health at every size, we brought in food insecurity, we brought in discrimination, we brought in all of the things, spirituality, movement, and they were like kids in a candy shop, for a silly way to describe it, really supportive and really excited, and felt actually like you could tell that it sparked and these are the women involved in writing standards of practice for all dietetic practice groups. So that was important to share, that I've seen the one-on-one change with the people who start seeing and hearing something different, and they're able to see and hear it without judgment, because it's hard not to, but to be able to be safe for them. And honestly, I wanted to kind of ridicule this person and go, how in the heck have you not heard of intuitive eating? Yeah. Where have you been? But choosing not to do that kept the bridge open. And also the standards, we did Megan Niskanen completely. The graphic, the figure 4, is now, for the very first time, the Academy bucked us hard on this. They wanted to list the eating disorder diagnoses in order of alphabetical order. What's first? Anorexia. People, that has contributed to the world's assuming that is the only eating disorder, or and that's where they're like, well, it's only 1% of the population, so really we don't have to really worry about it. It's only 1%. No. So it is now in order of prevalence. So the first is, disordered eating, like patterns, and then we move into orthorexia, binge eating. So we listed them all, and it starts with the 30 million. And it goes down, and that subtle shift and we had to get approval for that. But that subtle shift, I think, is again, that new message coming out, that it's not just anorexia. And I think medical will just put it aside because, oh yeah, anorexia. I don't even have words. So anyway, just to share that story, that I have seen a shift, and I feel like there is more openness. Behavioral health got keynotes. Anyway, it's it's a personal choice, but like just bringing the message to those who maybe have never heard it before. We assume they have, and perhaps they have not.
Powerful, Tammy, so powerful. And especially just as you said, it seems like a small thing, an infograph, but actually it's so powerful. And it was so important that you fought for that to be presented the way that it needed to be, so that we're not reinforcing stereotypes. It's just, I think that's a wonderful example of the power of us standing up for things that we believe in, and you know, trying to make sure that we're heard in what we're trying to do here. And Tammy, I always learn so much from you, because I think I don't know if I would have been as gracious to that person who had no idea about intuitive eating. You know, it's like, haven't you been doing any CEUs? Like, it makes me, it's horrifying. But anyway, you're very gracious, and I always learn that from you. But what I wanted to ask the panel about is, and maybe you guys have the insight, because I have to say, I didn't really do a lot. I haven't put a lot of time into helping the AED advance itself, because I felt that there were deaf ears. And so I've found that I've had more ability to at least feel helpful working at, you know, CSAB here in New York, the Center for the Study of Anorexia and Bulimia, or, you know, I was on the Binge Eating Disorder Association's board, and now with IDAP. So I felt as though I could contribute more in those associations. But for those young RDs out there who are thinking, well, who are the people who decide about the curriculum and the future of RDs and where we're headed and what we should be doing strategically? Who are the people we should be going to talk to and be setting up these meetings and bringing in research to support our opinions and thoughts on this? Does anyone have any insight?
Beth, share about the task force. Share about what ASIN
You want me to?
has.
Yeah, that'd be great, Beth.
So, and Jessica, I know, Tammy, you, all three of us are involved in this, and so grateful. And just in case anyone didn't catch what Tammy was talking about, that's the standards of practice for dietitians and eating disorder care. And so if you can find that, it is an amazing document, and it's like a 7-year document. I mean, this is intended. Yeah.
It hadn't been updated since 2011, but it should be every 7 years, and it's housed under behavioral health nutrition. Yeah.
So important. So you've interacted with people within the academy. It's been 20 years in the making, but there is now, and I was a dietetic internship director. So we have requirements of what we need to cover, and we're also preparing students for the exam and to be successful. And so there's only so many minutes that you have in front of your student and to make that impact. What I want to say is we are allowed to announce now, because it has been signed with the Academy and ASIN. There is, by 2022, there will be a weight inclusive toolkit that is required for all dietetic students. I have nothing to do with getting it to this place, but I just want you to know it's happening.
Yay.
I'm super excited.
Oh,
and I do want
amazing.
to, I wanted to say, Melainie, when you said that RDs are still valued, getting your RD is still valuable. Who else in the healthcare world gets 6-7 years of training on nutrition? That's us.
That's right.
So, you know, doctors or influencers on the web, or any of the Instagram or anything else, they don't have the training, and they're making things up. And so my most exciting, fun one was the celery juice guy, who's a medical medium, and he hears what you need to do, and everything can be cured with celery juice. And he's got a bazillion followers.
I got to tell you, we could make so much money, Beth, couldn't we? Selling snake oil and celery juice,
yes.
I love it.
And I do want to add to what Tammy had said about that individual, and just having compassion for where they've, I was talking to a group of dietetic interns within the past year, a really great group. And one of the well-seasoned RDs, not an ED RD, but had said, if weight management isn't part of what dietitians are taught, what do we have left? And I just went, Oh, I had no idea that that was even like considered to be part of what dietitian, that's how far removed I am from general dietetics education right now.
I'm going to jump in for a second if it's okay, because believe it or not, we have a bit of time left, but we're going to be about 10 minutes left, I think. And we'd like to ask one more question to all of you to conclude. So the question is, think about when you were first starting out your profession as a dietitian. What do you wish you knew then as a new RD that you know now? And anyone can take that one.
Start. I wish I knew that the systems are rotten to the core, because I spent way too much time like climbing up the ladders thinking if I could just find the benevolent old man with the white beard sitting on a throne at the top of every organization and explain to them how screwed up things were, that they would say, oh, that is not how things are supposed to work. Thank you, Jessica, for bringing that to my attention. And then they would fix it. And instead, I just had to leave all of those horrible systems and institutions and start my own. And I do believe that the future of dietetics is not the academy, even though it still has a lot of power. I think that the reason you're seeing, and maybe this is grandiose of me, but I think the reason that there are more things going on at Bensi about eating disorders is because of IFED, because the whole SCAN thing, how eating disorders got ripped from SCAN almost against their will. And, you know, part of it was saying, you know, the president of SCAN saying to the academy, look, you've got 800 dietitians who many are not members of the academy and have gone outside the academy to get their needs met. So that tells you that the academy is not meeting the needs of eating disorder dietitians. It's kind of the way diversified dietetics has so much more of a voice than, let's say, Novodan or something like that, because within the academy, it's not threatening to the academy. But when a group of dietitians steps out of the academy to say, you are not meeting our needs, that is threatening the academy, because it threatens the system, because it threatens the money of those 800 dietitians that take their $300 membership out of the academy. So I think that there's definitely, I'm for working within the institution, but if you think about the weight inclusivity toolkit, that was an outside group that then applied to the academy for, you know, in the diversity and inclusion initiative. So I'm just saying, I feel like there's a limit to what you can do within the system. And so try, and that's great, but never be scared to step out and start your own thing. Because if you can, like the anti-diet student association, sometimes it's an outside organization that ends up making a bigger impact on the original organization.
Yep. So true, Jess. So true. Panelists, would you like to answer that question? What do you wish you had known when you started out?
Yeah, I can answer that. I wish I would have known how many wonderful people are out there ready to align with you, with me, and not just dietitians, and how non-competitive it is, where you can just support one another, be with one another, learn from each other. As Jessica said at the very beginning of this, there's unfortunately plenty of work to go around as an ED-RD. And the best way that we can help our clients is to continue that learning that someone else said. I think it was maybe Tammy, never stop learning.
Yeah. How about you, Tam? Absolutely, Beth.
Many thoughts. I wish I knew that a client's recovery, this will sound weird, maybe not. I wish I knew and that I didn't have to know everything. I wish I knew then that I shouldn't work harder than my client. And I say that with all compassion. It helps you have boundaries around, and, you know, I think that's important. I also wish we didn't get, one of the questions that came through is about the prevalence of disordered eating, dysfunctional eating behaviors, thoughts in the dietetic students. And I was definitely one of those. And I wished someone had told me then, we've changed so much, but that you are not required to eat perfect, be perfect around food. You know, we've learned that in this field, but it would be a message, I think, that all dietitian students need to hear, whether they're in this field or not. So I don't know if that made sense, but those would be some takeaways.
Yeah, Tam, that's awesome. Thank you for that. And that's also part of burnout, right? When we're working harder than our clients. I would say I wish I'd known a little bit about what we reflected on today, which is I wish I'd known that we are the only healthcare professionals who have at least 6 years of training in nutrition. Like, we are the experts. I think I was quite intimidated, even though it was a second career for me. So, you know, I was in my early 30s when I started in this field. But I was very deferential to doctors in the hospital setting, even to therapists, once I went into private practice, because somehow you assume, or at least I used to assume, that they know what I know around nutrition. It's interesting how we have that thought process, right? And so I really try and really highlight to my students now and my young RD interns, no one else has the absolute sheer volume of training and knowledge around nutrition. It's a little bit more complicated than I eat food, so therefore I am a food expert, because we've had 6 years of training, so there might be a little bit more to it, is how I like to put it. And so I was deferential, and the reality is what you guys said today, which is, you know, an average doctor maybe has had one nutrition class of 40 hours. Nutritionists out there in the state of New York, you can call yourself a nutritionist if you've done one course of 40 hours. What do you learn in 40 hours? Macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein, fat, something like that. But with us, especially requiring the master's level training to in the way I view it, is really at that level, you start to really get immersed in the research. And so you're able to read the research and evaluate the research to see whether the research is actually legit or actually it's not really great caliber. And so that I think is one of the benefits of being at, you know, educated at that level, is to truly understand the research and not just be repeating information that you've been told without a sense of its accuracy. So I guess what I want to say is I wish I'd known that sooner, because I think I would have had found my voice sooner. And of course, not to be arrogant, but to always maintain the bridges of communication. But we truly are the experts. And I think we need to just remind ourselves of that. You know, no one else knows what we know. So hold that and keep that in your pocket. So we're seeing lots of thank yous coming in. Was there anything else from the panelists today, or from Michelle and Leslie? Guys, I could talk to you for another couple of hours. I mean, It's just so easy.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Beth and Jess, it was awesome to have you at our coffee talk.
All four of you was just wonderful. And we have many, many more questions that are overflowing that we couldn't get to, that we can always do another time. So we love to hear feedback on the Coffee Talk Live event. So if anyone has any wishes for the future, just reach out to us and let us know.